So I'd like to invite Cam to come and do his presentation. Come, Cam.
Sure.
And explain how the EDC can help businesses.
Morning. Thanks again for having us. Great job, Kristen. I'm going to steal some of those. But just so I get a better idea as to where you're coming from, because the length and breadth of industries, sectors that EDC works within is pretty diverse. So maybe if I could just ask everybody to do like maybe 15, 30 seconds, who you are, you know, where you'd like to be going, and then maybe any questions that you may have had that brought you in here today. Can we start at the back?
I've imported and exported automotive stuff
Okay.
for a long time,
Okay.
with lots of difficulties. You mentioned the borders.
Okay.
Borders
Is that
and
parts, machinery? What does that look like? Okay.
It's, the borders just,
Thickening.
it's tough to understand if you know what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a kind of revolving door some days.
Yeah. Yourself?
Been in business since 2003, so about 15 years. Manufacturer of LED lighting products. So if you went to Tim Hortons today and you saw those donuts lit up, they were lit up probably by my LED strips. We supply to Canadian Tire, retail stores. However, about 2 years ago, we had local farmers asking us for a product that would help illuminate or grow a green leafy substance that enters our market.
Whatever would have been the change there.
We are now in the horticultural lighting business
Excellent.
and exporting to the U.S. and really worried about those rules and regulations and attending trade shows, which I don't want to be banned for life for entering the U.S.
Yeah, well, there's some very real concerns there. How about yourself, Beth?
I work for Blue Sweep Equipment. They manufacture picnic sweepers. They'll do the rest of my talk.
Okay, very good.
With them.
Magnetic sweepers, what would they be used for? What would
Yeah,
they be
we
used for?
various magnetic products for picking up metal debris, or everything from little push brooms or cruisers for picking up nails. And we do larger tow behind units we sell to landfills and military and
Okay.
airports.
Interesting. Good, good. Has anybody heard of Export Development Canada before? Okay, once or twice, that's good. All right, I'll take that. I'll take that as a win, because usually you get the deer in the headlights look. So, just as a kind of a general background, we're a Crown agency, so similar to Business Development Bank of Canada, which you may be more comfortable with as far as, you know, presentation in the market, because Export Development Canada is very niche. We don't get the call every day. We usually get it when the house is on fire or somebody's hair is on fire as to issues at the border, or I've got an inquiry. A very good point, Chris, is I've got an inquiry from India and I don't even know the buyer. What, if anything, can you guys do? So the other side of it too is that unfortunately, like some agencies, as you can see, it's financially self-sustaining. So there are no taxpayer dollars. So all of our programs are designed as a fee-based service, working in conjunction with either yourself or with a chartered bank. The reason is that all of the programs are designed to be there for the next one that's looking at working with us. And what I like to focus on is the fact that most of these challenge opportunities and whatnot that do result in an EDC program are all really, I mean, I think everybody in Ottawa would like to think that they came up with these great ideas and, you know, this is what people need. But almost all of our programs, since we've been, if you want to call it created or stood up, since the end of the Second World War, have all come from challenges and, I guess more importantly, opportunities that Canadian companies have been looking at, because again, like yourself, you get an inquiry as a buyer opportunity overseas. Can you or should you be working with these companies? So that's when somebody would typically pick up the phone and give EDC the call. Another salient point is that we can deal with direct as well as indirect export. So this is something we're focusing on more and more, because if you think about an automotive supplier, they're supplying from, let's say, a Windsor tool that goes to Tilsonburg. That tool then cranks out parts that goes into the CAMI plant. Because of the fact that 60 to 70% of any vehicle that's manufactured in Canada is for export purposes, we can actually help the tooler. So this is something where if you're selling to a company, you don't necessarily see it as an export. In a lot of cases, we can draw a line to an export store. Now, that unfortunately is not the convenience store that's selling a chocolate bar to the truck driver that's driving across the border. But if it's an input to a supply chain, which is primarily export, it may be something we can get behind. So that's kind of a critical point. What does EDC do? I'm not going to hit you over the head with acronyms, programs, these types of things. It really comes down to four things. And these are, I think, the just the buckets or the silos that I like to kind of focus on, and then narrow it down into actual examples of companies that I'm working with. So market intelligence, this is obviously one of the key things when you're looking at, exploring a new market, you're looking at how to get something done. We now have, in conjunction again with, Kristen and her group, which is, a terrific number of services, but the market intelligence piece is something we've stood up a team specifically to help you when you're, into your HS code going, what am I doing here? To fire off an email and say, listen, this is the issue I'm having. I'm looking for more information on this. Can you give me a hand? That goes directly to an export help team, which then is able to put forward or send out as an email, typically some really good resources that help you get to where you need to go without having to do all the legwork. Although Google makes it a lot easier these days. The other side of what we do then turns into, so the good news is that that's free. That's the only thing we do that's free. The rest of the programs, which we kind of bucket up into asset protection, working capital and financing, those are the fee per use services that we have. So getting a little bit more granular, what does it look like? Now this is unfortunately a little bit, well, it's fortunately a dated stream. So this is where EDC has actually collated. So in my experience with small business people, they like to do things themselves. They don't like to sub a lot out. They want to make sure that it's there when they need it. So the website actually has a tremendous amount of resources that are there at your fingertips that we've spent, I would suggest, a pretty good amount of time being, very conscious of the information that you're looking at. What are some of the gaps in, let's say, a knowledge base where you may or may not just want to, you're up at 4 a.m. because your brain's gone crazy. There's a ton of resources on the website. The other thing that was actually post this deck that I put together is that we've also started to build out, as part of the market intelligence piece, some of the global trade facilitation, if you want to call it that. So for example, yourself looking for new markets, you're looking for new buyers. And that's kind of where I come at it from, is that it's, it sounds to some, I guess, sexy exporting. It's really just doing more sales. And in a lot of cases, at much better margins than your competition around here. So we have also stood up, and I should probably send out some new links for you. I'll forward them on to Chris. We have the global trade team, which is designing around procurement needs of foreign companies and Canadian capabilities. So I'm not going to get too far into that without refreshing my slide deck, so sorry about that, Chris. This isn't like a file. Now this one's interesting. So, historically EDC has been known as, a very large export credit agency that does some very large deals. In fact, it's 85 to 90% of the clients that we work with are sales under 10. But when we do go to market, again, no taxpayer dollars, so nobody, it's a goat herder in Kazakhstan where your chances of recovery are very low, it's going to have an effect, and then you get a bulk discount. Same way if you went to Costco and bought 24 muffins, they're going to be 60 cents a piece. You buy the same one at Starbucks, it's $8. So those three factors usually get you in maybe 0.5%, maybe 1.5%. But knowing it ahead of time, knowing that you can offer these terms, you can actually, in most cases, give them an option. You can say, listen, if you want to pay me FOB Simcoe or FOB Montreal before it's left port, it's one price. But if you want 90 days or 120 days to pay me, then it's going to be a different price. So you know what it costs. But in a lot of cases, like anything, nobody would sell a car these days if you didn't have financing available. You really wouldn't. In some countries where you don't have bank or access to credit, it really is turning into quite the sales tool. So. And you can do one buyer. If you wanted to give it a test world, there's the Trade Protect, where it's one buyer, one contract. You just want to have it insured, sleep at night. It's very easy to do. Is that kind of clear so far? Risk mitigation? Okay, so what does that look like? So you've worked with the province, you've worked with Chris, you've worked with global affairs. You get the money to go to a trade show in Germany, you get the PO. You can actually get online, you can find out if we can insure a receivable. Actually, one guy's really smart. He'll go to a trade show, collect the business cards that he wants to talk to, gets onto our system online, determines whether or not he can offer them terms, and then goes down to breakfast the next morning. He doesn't even tell them, he doesn't have to, that we're involved, but he may just say something like, listen, want to work with you guys, I'll give you 90 days, don't worry about it. Or you can say, listen, I work with the government of Canada, they might need to know a little bit more about you, but, so there are different ways to use that, that program, that tool, but it really does work when it works. So you've got an insured receivable, you bring it to the bank, you say, can you margin it? And this is where we can actually work with the bank, with yourselves, in order to increase your financing available. So if you think about it, that you've got more assets that you can include, you then may need a bigger bucket that you can do more sales to get the sales growth. I mean, cash is one input, but it's pretty critical on any given day. So we've got several, if not many, ways that we can work with the bank to increase your access to cash, and again, free up cash if you've got collateral tied up. So I won't get too far into it. I'm surprised there wasn't more in the ag space, but we've got the ability to work with foreign exchange guarantees. Big one would be if, let's say, you had a huge order for some of these LED lightings. I'm not sure what your average size contract may be, but if you needed to build a specific piece of equipment, there was a longer lead time into it, more costs incurred, we may be able to get the banks more comfortable with it. But really the operating lines, the ability, the access to cash in a lot of scenarios will afford you the opportunity to drive more sales. Make sense? Okay. And financing. So direct finance to the foreign customer, that comes up every once in a while. If we do it directly, it's much more expensive. So we actually have a partner now called Elevate Financial, if anybody's interested. We work with them behind the scenes on a guarantee structure whereby they do the due diligence on the foreign buyer. If they're comfortable with it, we're comfortable with their own underwriting, we may be able to guarantee that loan so that actually you're paid before the product's even shipped. You then do have to have a strong foreign credit, but it is an option. Foreign buyers, I mentioned that. And then the other one too is that this is what we typically see. So if you think about the automotive supply chain, GM set up in Mexico, love it or like it, that's one of their decisions. So they've, years ago and years ago, they would say, okay, you can just ship your product from Canada, no problem. So what happened? Thickening border on both sides of it, so both the Canada-US and the US and Mexico. They say, listen, you need to keep a stock of inventory here in Mexico. Okay, that's one thing, that's a different one. But when they actually have said to several, if not many, that to remain on the preferred supplier list, you need to have a facility in Mexico. That's when kind of the bank is very uncomfortable with that type of scenario, particularly if the Canadian company is asking them to lend against assets outside of Canada. So think about it from the kind of view of, Bombardier, for example. Fortunately, they don't have the Boeing problems right now, but they've got their wings made in Ireland, the fuselage in China, final assembly in Mexico, but the brain trust is in Canada. That's why we can support them. But when they need, or Bombardier or Canadian companies need to set up shop outside Canada to take advantage of local regulations, local rules, have a local presence, it's much easier sometimes with a zip code rather than a postal code. That's when it's very difficult for most banks and a lot of Canadian companies to finance that. That's when Export Development Canada has the ability, again, provided that it's not just we're picking up stakes and heading somewhere else, provided like the essential jobs are still held in Canada, we're comfortable looking at assets outside of Canada.